Good evening. Welcome to the second version of the AI Ready webinars. This time around, we are joined by Crachad, STEM teacher extraordinaire, currently the head of computing and edtech at King's College. I've known Crachad for a few years now as a colleague at Windsor and in other circles. And to be honest with you, we could probably sit here and do what we're going to do without anybody else around. We could probably talk for hours about what we're doing. But Crachad knows his stuff in terms of the world of STEM, in terms of the world of AI, in terms of the world of anything computing and tech related. And I always love kind of leaning into his expert knowledge and also having conversations about all these areas. And hopefully those of you who are alive and also watching this recorded can take something away from this. That's the whole goal of these meetings, is to be able to provide teachers and anybody else in Nassau and further afield some tips and tricks about how to get the best out of AI in their workflow and linked with education. So basically what we're going to do is that Crachad is going to launch into his demo and show things, so then he can let things run in the background, explain a few other things that he does linked with AI. And then once that has happened, we've got a few kind of big questions that we can tackle and discuss. But if you have any questions yourselves, if you're watching live, please do put them into the chat and we can tackle those as well. So over to you, Mr. Crachad.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Tom, and good evening, everybody that's joining us. As Tom talked about, my name is Crachad Laing. I'm an educator, I'm an engineer, and majorly I'm an advocate for technology advancement, technology accessibility, and equity in these digital spaces. Artificial intelligence, as you guys are very aware of because you're on this call, has been the biggest boom that we've seen in modern technology, as well as advancement, efficiency, collaboration, all different aspects of how we do life, how we work, how we have fun, how we're entertained. And we're here to have a conversation and a showcase in terms of how you could get on board with these tools. I teach currently at a primary school and high school level, and one of the things that I consistently remind my students of is that reinforcement is the best way to learn. And so even if I'm talking about things that you may already be exposed to, at the end of the day, being able to hear it again, hear it from a different perspective, hear it from a new lens, really does refine your understanding of what it is that we're getting ready to dive into. So I'm going to share screen quickly because we're going to do this in an interesting way. And so I call it a live cooking session because same way with cooking, you're starting with raw random ingredients. You have an idea of what your final outcome should look and taste like. And you're going to make iterations or attempts to go from this obscure, abstract set of raw ingredients into a final outcome of a well-presented, good tasting dish. And we're going to do a little bit of that today together. So we're going to do that in a couple different capacities. One of them, we're going to start from, essentially, we're going to go through workflows and my workflows specifically in terms of how I utilize generative AI tools to get to specific outcomes in different categories. And some of the tools we'll be using today, well, actually, the only 3 tools we'll be using today are ChatGPT. We'll be using V0 or V0, which is a generative software engineer. And we'll be using Claude, which is a multi-purpose agent. And we'll be using that in 2 fashions. One in a ChatGPT conversational-like fashion, but then again, we'll be utilizing Claude's design tool to be able to bring some things and ideas to life. And so, as I said, I'm an educator, but what I would say is that AI itself spans across all industries. And so workflows that apply in education more than likely apply in finance. Workflows that apply in finance more than likely apply in medicine. Those that apply in medicine apply in engineering and technology works as well. And so as we're working through what it is that we're doing, yes, I'm going to be doing this through the lens of an educator, but it would be really, really beneficial if you were to consider and think about these tools and how you could utilize these processes in your own work. That's one of the cool things about AI to me is that it's a bit ambiguous, right? It can assimilate into any industry and space. It gets our interactions digitally down to its fundamental core. Because really, there's not much difference between QuickBooks, the common accounting software, and TikTok, right? The social media platform and entertainment platform. From a ones and zeros from a back end standpoint, what's actually happening underneath the hood, both of those operate in a similar fashion. And AI allows us to be able to get deep into the technological interaction while doing that on our terms and for our specific industry. And so we'll start with my lesson objectives. And so as an educator, a big part of what it is that I do is obviously presenting content and, putting together teaching content and information and resources. But a big part of that is also the reflection, the refinement, as well as the feedback and documentation. And so there's a whole public speaking part of this, right? There's a marketing and communications part of this, but then there's also a big administrative part of educators' workflows. And so I thought this would be a great place to start, even though most of us probably aren't educators in this specific room. But again, looking at these workflows for what's organically happening as opposed to how does this directly apply to my industry. I think that's a mindset shift that's really helpful in AI, being able to think really laterally, right? Not just in one direction, but understanding how the same principles and processes can apply across different spaces. And so let's take a look at this example here. These are my Cambridge objectives for year 1, year 2, year 3. There's a set of topics as well as specific objectives that I need to hit for each lesson in particular. What I typically start out as, so I'm a teacher who's engagement first. So like I want to make sure that my students are going to enjoy what it is that we're doing. And so my first thoughts are brainstorming are oftentimes, what does this activity look like and feel like? From there, I tie it to specific objectives. And so let's say we wanted to do a 2D design activity on utilizing Canva, but we wanted to then follow units of, let's take a couple random ones. So I'll have some computational thinking objectives and I'll put that over there. I'll take programming objectives. And notice, even in this instance, like this isn't what my workflow would look like for class. It's a lot more specific. But for the sake of this example, I wanted to show the diversity of artificial intelligence platforms. What I'm doing is in this spreadsheet, this is Google Sheets, similar to Excel. I'm highlighting these cells and I'm copying them. So I'm right-clicking to copy them. And then I'm pasting them over here. Because what I want to do is centralize the specific objectives that I'd like for my lesson to be around and have them right here. So I'm now going from my Cambridge objectives. This is directly from the content of my curriculum. Similarly to how if you work in a bank, there's probably a set of work processes and business requirements and business rules that you have to follow that's in a document somewhere. If you work at a hospital, there's medical procedures, there's certain, again, objectives that you must meet for each interaction. So this is me centralizing the specific objectives that I want to interact with for this project. And so whatever documentation that may be for you, this is my grounds of research. And actually, we'll take this a step further. So I'm going to copy these objectives and I'm going to come over to ChatGPT. And the first thing I'll do is just paste these in there. I'm going to create some space in my context window because, again, like this is a text box, but it's defined as a context window because it gathers way more than just text. We don't have to just give it simple words and interact conversationally. I can give this a voice note. I could give it a video. I can give it photos along with that text. It's almost like as you're trying to describe things to somebody, you want to use as much details and reference as possible. As we're working with these agents, we want to see them in a similar light where we're assuming they know nothing. And the more details that I can give you, the better you're going to give me of an outcome that I'm looking for and going for here. So we'll start with these objectives. And what I'm also going to do is get a Google search going. Google seems a little bit obsolete these days because everybody's all AI. But let's say Cambridge computing objectives. Ooh, actually, let's say NVIDIA, the mother, father, whatever you want to call it, of AI. NVIDIA is the company that makes all the chips that a lot of these language models run off of. So NVIDIA latest developments. Because as a part of my lessons too, I want to make sure that it's relevant, right? I want to make sure that it's connected to the modern world and what my kids will probably see in the news on social media. So we started with our Cambridge objectives, making sure that we're strongly aligned with the business documentation and the desired outcomes and processes of our industry, whether that be medicine. I would probably be referring to some medical documentation, employee handbooks, whether that be accounts. I'll probably be referring to business processes and business rules, right? I'm just trying to make it a little bit relevant for all of our different potential audiences. So even here, right, NVIDIA is currently driving major breakthroughs in agentic physical and AI robotics. We'll take that text as well. And now I'm coming back to ChatGPT, where I also have my objectives along with this text. Now what we'll do is some prompt engineering. And I guess we've been doing prompt engineering this whole time, but now I'm really strictly defining my prompt. I've defined my context and the information that I want to be relevant in what it is that I'm looking for. And then we also now are given a specific goal or outcome. And I'll say, hey, chat, I'd like to create both a physical paper worksheet along with a digital interactive worksheet based on this content. I've included the NVIDIA snippet as a reference to real world application of what it is that we're discussing. And so what ChatGPT is going to give me now is text in the form of an outline or structure for what this sort of lesson could look like. And notice, I haven't asked for a lesson plan. I've asked for a physical worksheet along with digital interactive worksheet. And this is the content that I've gotten. Learning objectives, regurgitating what it is that my context was. So this might be at the beginning of your document, it outlines all the business policies and rules that align with what this type of project and the outcomes we're looking for on this project may be. If this is a financial modeling, because you're an accountant, you might have all the financial guidelines and references that you would have used, maybe even some links in those objectives as well. And so here now, I have this text document, right? Part 1, real world technology, which is exactly what it is that I'm going for. Discussing NVIDIA's presence in the real world. Part 2, following the algorithm. And I like this actually. Read the steps below. And then it has a set of curated questions. What I'm doing as the human in the loop, because as we're talking about all this automation, humans still have a role here. Our role is largely managerial and quality assurance based. And so these systems themselves, they're predictive, which we'll talk about in a little bit as we get some generations going. But they're not necessarily intelligent, right? They're fast and they're powerful, but they're not cognitive, meaning that they can't take relevant information or context. They can't take the specific subtleties of what it is that your outcome desires and assume those things. You as the human, you're still in control of this thing. And so only you know what good actually looks like. All right, so I like this part 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. I'm going to skim through this like right now, but as I'm preparing these for my actual professional environment, I want to take really good looks and make some tweaks here. And so here's the structure for the digital interaction. Okay, great. So we're going to take this first thing here, which is our worksheet. And I'm going to copy this from ChatGPT now. ChatGPT is a tool that's really, really good at conversational tasks. It's really, really good at research. It's good giving you text-based outcomes. But if I were to give my students this or put this up on the board, this isn't necessarily attractive or appealing. One of the tools that I've been using majorly throughout the past several months has been Claude Design. I'm a big Claude fan generally. Claude, like as we could see here, like this is fair game, right? Everything. Intro to AI slides, which we'll look at in a second, actually. And I'll show you guys how I got to those slides as well. Microbit slides for year 4, program details, right? And so a lot of what it is that this is the workflow that I use like every single day. And so now we're generating what was, so I'm going to reflect back now, because again, we're doing this in a really kind of free-flowing, unobjective type of way. Okay, perfect. And so this is back to Claude Design, and we'll call this real world computing application. So I'm doing a lesson with students on how we could create real world or how our skills that we're learning in class relate to what it is that's happening in the real world. And so again, I'm back to my prompt. I got this awesome set of objectives along with questions, along with content, great structure from ChatGPT. I like it. I feel good about it. I'm going to go ahead and copy that now into Claude Design. I'm pasting that text, which shows up as pasted text, and I'm going to give Claude what it is that I'm looking for. Hey, Claude, I'd like to make an interactive presentation for my students on the pasted content. content is a worksheet, but I need slides that complement it. Perfect. So what I love about Claude Design is two things. Claude itself, Anthropic's one of the big tech or big AI companies, and I like their ethical approach. They care a lot about the safety of the tools, the guard railing of the tools, and the user experience generally. And then what's really cool about Claude Design is if anybody's used Canva before, which is the graphic design software where you have loads of elements, loads of features, it's really easy to use and free flowing. Claude Design is built off of Canva. And so again, we talked about how underneath the hood of a lot of technologies, it's a lot of the same interactions. And that's one of the superpowers of AI is that it can wrap around a lot of existing infrastructure and make it more efficient, more effective, and oftentimes better. And so as I've listed my prompt into Claude Design, remember, we started off with our Cambridge objectives in our spreadsheet. We chose from what objectives it is like we really wanted to focus on in this particular lesson or setting. We then went into ChatGPT to turn those objectives into content, right? To build it out in a more robust way, to section it off and make it logical. Now we're in Claude Design where we're turning that into something visual. I now want to present this to people. I've ideated or brainstormed my ideas, picked my objectives. I've then refined those objectives into specific content, a specific structure and flow that I want for, a lesson or an interaction or a presentation delivery to, my team or work group. And then finally, I'm in Claude Design to be able to make that visually appealing. And so one of the cool things about Claude Design, if we notice, it asks me questions. And so again, AI isn't intelligent in the same way that humans are intelligent. Humans are cognitively intelligent. AI is deterministically intelligent. And so it makes really good, strong, probabilistic predictions to the next outcome. And so what I love about Claude Design is that we get to refine the specifics because instead of it just taking my request and assuming what it is that I want, it collaborates, kind of like humans do. And so right now I have quick questions about your robots and AI presentation. How long do I want it? Short, about 15 minutes. What visual style am I feeling? I think we want friendly, chunky shapes and bold colors. How interactive should the slides be? So if we notice here, these ones let me choose multiple, and I'm actually going to choose all of them, except timers. I don't really like the timer ones. And obviously not just clean slides. So we'll choose all 4 of the different interactive components here. And again, consider this from your lens, your industry, your space. The same processes, tools, and like outcomes apply to your space as well. All right, should slides mirror the worksheet sections exactly? Let's say mostly, but we could reorganize the flow. And so even as I'm working through these questions and responding to these questions, it sounds like a really experienced partner, right? It feels like somebody that has done this before and they know the questions that are necessary to what might happen in my interaction, what wouldn't be relevant to how we produce this final outcome. Any school name, logo, or NVIDIA mentions to include. No branding needed. And from here, we're going to continue and let this go. Along with that, so a part of what it is that I push for from an engagement standpoint is being able to create opportunities for my students to reflect or re-engage with the content in a more, again, engaging, playful, fun type of manner. For this, I really love a tool called V0. And it's V0. I keep calling it V0. But V0 is an agentic software engineer. And so look at what we're going to do now. While Claude Design is doing its thing, it's caramelizing onions, because that's another clever thing with Claude. They have some really, really weird descriptions for how they're, or describing what their models are doing at specific times. But as it's caramelizing onions, I'm going to move on to another task, because that's one of the superpowers of AI. It allows you to do much more in 30 minutes than you could have done before. Like a presentation like what this is going to produce would have probably taken me about a solid 45 minutes to an hour if I'm really, really focused. But now as this is generating to my likeness and my specificity, I get to move on to another task. And so what we're actually going to do is we're going to take this exact same ChatGPT prompt. Check this out. Like we're using the same content or context in multiple environments and types of interactions now. So we're going to take this from here and I'm going to go into VO. I'm going to tell VO from the pasted text, I'd like to make an interactive, let's say it's a jumper game. The goal of this game is for my students to reflect and reinforce the content of our lesson. They would have just finished a class discussion, a worksheet, and now we'd like an extension activity. I'll give it even more details. The game should make students get at least 80% on a short mini quiz at the end of each level. The goal is to platform jump to collect insights. Keep in mind, this is all completely random. I did not think about this before the session started. And oftentimes, like, that's how my interactions with AI go. I love that it allows me to start a relatively blank, kind of messy slate and refine from there. And so while VO is thinking, reading the pasted text, thinking some more, this agentic software engineer is going to take all that content, mixed with its database of content, mixed with its internet research, and apply its coding skills to give me a really, really robust sort of situation. I'm going to check back in with Claude Design here, where I see, okay, this is still doing its thing. And so it says this design system's empty. It's going to start crafting. It'll give me updated to-dos. People talk often about how AI creates a brain drain. It creates a cognitive inertia for human beings. It makes us not think as much or as deeply as we typically would, but I just couldn't disagree more. I've actually gone much deeper into the simplest tasks just because, again, I have a thought partner, somebody that, or something that I can interact with, that I can converse with, something that will give me feedback that's relevant and specific to what it is that I'm going for. And so I say that to say, as your LLM or your tool, your platform that you're using is giving you insights into what it's doing, like we see on this sidebar here, it's actually relatively important that we pay attention if our goal is to learn, right? And I argue that learning is still a fundamental part of these interactions because, like, I've been AI heavy for maybe the past 2 years, 2.5 years. And one thing you'll notice is the tools change. They change really, really quickly, even within your industry and space. And so one of the easier ways to create efficiency through those changes, being able to jump from, you know, the old platform to the new platform, being able to do more intricate things within your current platforms or tools that you're using, it really does require a learning mindset and that sort of curiosity. And so as I'm working with these tools, I'm constantly curious about what it is that they're doing. All right, so VO's, but we just checked in with Claude. We'll check back in with VO. VO is creating our game and quiz panel. So while these generations are happening, guys, I think it's a great chance to talk a little bit more about what we just did foundationally, right? And so if we take a look here, I have some intro to AI slides, which we're going to talk about in a second. Only a couple of them, though. But let's think about how I got to these slides. If we take a look at my left chat window here, I told Claude, I need you to use the attached PowerPoint as a reference for the content and the flow for the slide deck I'd like to make. And so a couple months ago, Tom, I was at AI Ready Bahamas, and I had this slideshow, right? Or this slide deck that included visuals for what it is that I was talking about in that presentation. And I wanted to rework it. I didn't really like how it looked and the structure of it. And so for another presentation that was really similar, I wanted to rework these slides. And so look at how I've prompted through attaching my slides. So first thing, I gave a prompt. Next thing you'll notice, Claude tells me, I don't see a PowerPoint slide attached to your project because I forgot to attach the slides. And again, in that point I'm making here is that we don't have to be perfect as we're interacting with these tools. I argue that's one of the more powerful points of these tools is that it meets you exactly where you are. And so if you're the type of person that's going to say, attach PowerPoint, but forget to attach the PowerPoint, that's okay, right? I don't think we've ever seen a more patient mentor. I don't think we've ever seen a more experienced instructor. I don't think we've ever seen a better learning partner than AI tools. Humans get impatient. Humans don't know it all. Humans hate regurgitating or repeating themselves, and large language models just don't do that. Like if I told a coworker, hey, see the attached PowerPoint, I'd probably get an email back relatively aggressively, hey, there's no attached PowerPoint. What are you doing? But even as we see, my LLM is just going to remind me. And so I gave it my slides, answered some questions, blah, 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 blah. And now we're here. Like even down to let's down to it, right? There's certain slides where I wanted pictures. Use these as the photos on slide 3. I screenshotted these from Instagram, dragged it into the chat window and told it, hey, use these for the photos. Use this for the photo on slide 2. Use these for the photos on slide 15. And so we see how it's really iterative, it's interactive, it's back and forth, kind of like a thought partner. So I'm going to quickly talk through a couple of these slides, though, just so that we're on the same page. I started with the actual practical part of it because I knew that the generation of the presentation as well as the game itself would take a little while. So while those are generating, let's talk a little bit more about artificial intelligence generally. Artificial intelligence as we know it in 2026 is much different than AI that we may have heard about in the 2010s or the mid and early 2000s, where those systems were largely still programmed, right? There was still a human that wrote certain rules that gauged how you would respond. Like some of us may still remember interacting with chatbots on websites. Like if you go to Expedia or you go to JetBlue and you're booking a flight, you go to Amazon, there's always a little chat window where you could interact, but those still felt very much electronic. Generative artificial intelligence as we know it now, it fits in these 3 categories as I'm defining it. It's creative, it's massively trained, and so it's not set on just a set of rules, it's set on large data sets, being the entire internet, all content and video, pictures, text, books, things along those lines. And our current version of AI also gives us human-like outputs, meaning that, again, it feels like you're interacting with a thought partner. And so if we had to describe that shift, it's really that AI evolved from something that was more analytical or computational and robotic to something that's more human-like and creative. But again, we still are very far from artificial intelligence being anywhere close to the cognitive ability of human beings, at least from what's available publicly. And so as we think about artificial intelligence, generative AI, the major tool that we're all interacting with right now are large language models. And so large language models are essentially the brain behind these AI operations. And so if we had to think about artificial intelligence in comparison to the human body, for instance, like AI is the structure and the framework. All humans have a head, 2 legs, and arms, right? That's the framework, allowed them to consistently create this sort of interaction. LLMs are like the brain, where each of us has a different brain. We think differently, we process differently. We're going to remember at different rates. We're going to recollect at different rates, things as such. You could imagine how different a brain really is in a lot of ways, how different various language models are. Some of the common language models are, as we've seen, ChatGPT, like we've just used earlier, Claude, which we've used earlier, and Gemini, which is Google's version of, these same things. What I talked about earlier was that we now have artificial intelligence in the form of large language models, and those large language models, again, operate as the predictive or calculative brain of a digital interaction or operation. And so now that we have a brain, the application of that system, though, is quite different. Artificial intelligence systems, as we know it, reach far beyond just ChatGPT, right? That was very much the AI moment for everybody. It was the first LLM that I know that I used. But now we moved from just LLMs to tools that are built on top of LLMs. And so while ChatGPT might write me an amazing essay, Perplexity is another AI tool that's built on an LLM engine that would write me an even better essay with more specific references and better research and better grammar and better structure, just because it was fine-tuned to specifically be able to write, research, and document. We used V0 just now, or that's what's generating our learning-based game, right? Where that's really designed for websites, images, user interfaces, software generally. And although, again, my engine is the same engine that ChatGPT, who I'm just having a conversation and editing some photos with, it's the same engine. VO is refined specifically for software engineering and development. As we get deeper into software, as we're talking not just about developing websites, but we want to build mobile apps that ship to 100 people, or I want to build an automation system that my entire team and my accounting firm can use, I probably use something more like Claude Code, Replit, or Cursor. As we get into data and automation, we have things like Notion AI, and then Excel still stands king in terms of data gathering, data analysis. But Excel partnered with AI is very much a superpower. And so I'm going to break away from these slides for a second because I didn't want to get too slide centric, but I did want us to be on the same page of understanding in terms of artificial intelligence, large language models. But let's check on some of our prompts. As we can see, Claude is still doing its thing. Like, this has been like almost 10-ish minutes now, which is fine because we're going to be really happy with what the outcomes are. And then as we go back into our game as well, VO is also still setting up our project. And so as we're working with these tools, one of the things to consider is that multitasking is a skill, right? Being able to check in, quality assure, update, and then move on to the next task is what makes the AI superpowered human more proficient than how we've done work over the last several centuries or decades, I guess. While we're waiting on these, though, let's take a look at the next part of the automation. For me, being able to, the administrative tasks of teaching are very much the hardest. And so those were the first things that I thought about, hey, how can I automate this? And so similarly to other industries, like a doctor may really enjoy interacting with patients, may really enjoy doing surgeries, may really enjoy consultations, but they probably hate writing reports for the most part, right? And accountants, similarly, like I might love looking at financial models, financial projections, but similarly, like I hate the reporting, the documentation, as well as the administrative task of putting everything where it needs to go. For me, I've automated those tasks in a lot of ways. From my student grading, we still do a lot of paperwork sheets because I believe that learning happens from the hands up. And so we still print and write worksheets, but that grading itself has been automated. I create rubrics for my grading tasks or worksheets. A rubric is kind of like an answer key for what it is that that task may be about. And I use AI to let those rubrics or answer keys automate student results. And so if we take a look at this example, so even if we look at this, these aren't actually student results. Student information is very, very sensitive. And so I didn't want to use real student results. But if we scan through this spreadsheet right here, we've got Jaden Rule. He got a 3 out of 3 score in 8B. Well done. Teacher graded some check marks. We've got Alana Smith. 1 out of 3. Alana didn't do too hot. Got some teacher feedback there. So on and so forth. There's 10 worksheets from different students. One of the things we should notice is that these are all handwriting, but different handwriting, different pen colors, different sizes, things of the such. And one of the more powerful aspects of artificial intelligence that I interact with has been optical character recognition. And so let's check this out. I'm going to open up Claude Code. Oh, it's not what we wanted. I'm going to open up Claude Code here. And so we just looked at Claude Design. We looked at ChatGPT. We looked at these varying tools that are related to large language models and automation in itself. And so, again, just so that we're really, really strongly on the same page, we went from our CIE or Cambridge objectives, an Excel spreadsheet. We used ChatGPT to turn those objectives into content. We then used Claude Design to turn that content into presentable slides for the delivery of that lesson. We then used VO to turn that the content, the deliverable slides into a fun, engaging reinforcement opportunity and reflection opportunity for students. They've done their worksheet already as we described. Now I'm going to use Claude again, same tool from Anthropic, the same subscription as well. I have access to Claude Design, I have access to Claude LLM, but I also have access to Claude Code. And this looks a little bit scary, but trust me, it's not. So what I've done here is I've told Claude Code, take a look at this folder. That folder was the same file of worksheets we just looked at. I want you to create a students folder and sort them into subfolders. And I gave it the path for that folder. And so these are already graded worksheets. I just need to sort them. When I go to things like parent-teacher meetings, or when I see a parent in the parking lot who's upset that their student got a particular grade in an assignment, it's really helpful to have that documentation, as well as primarily for the students themselves. Like, we've all been students, and like, the minute you get a worksheet back, it's kind of a 50-50 chance that that thing makes it back home, right? It's a lot going on in the life of a student. You're young, you're doing a lot. And so being able to centralize your submissions as well as your feedback is really, really a huge thing, right? It allows us to reflect and backtrack and really pinpoint on specific issues. And so what I'm doing now is I took my files that are on my computer in my downloads folder, and I gave a systems level agent, being Claude Code, access to it. Traditionally, Claude Code's used for coding, right? Software engineering and development. But again, as we utilize AI tools, you have to think of it more foundationally, more laterally, and think of it from the perspective of, at least my lens, hey, you're my only partner for all tasks. If I need a workout plan today, hey, you're my go-to. If I need to sort student worksheets, you're my go-to. If I need to create slides and content, you're my go-to. And so as we're thinking about these tools, it's really, really good to see what they can do. One of the coolest thing about AI is that a lot of the developers, you want to say the founding fathers, the innovators of this technology, people on the cutting edge, also don't know specifically what it is that their tools can do. And so it's created this real nice baseline where everybody's on equal footing. And so it creates opportunity for individuals like yourself who are exposed to try things. And so we're going to continue on with this and see what this gives us at the end of it. What I'm trying to do is centralize my student submissions. I would have just gotten worksheets back from my students, graded all those worksheets, gave feedback. Now I need to centralize this because I'm going to give it back to them, the physical copies, but I still need my reflection. Okay, great. So now we have here, done. I created a students folder in my downloads folder called students, and sorted the 10 submissions into subfolders by student name, along with their stores. So let's check that out. I'm going to open up my Finder, and I'm going to go to downloads, if we can find it. There we go. In my downloads folder, look, I now have a students folder. And if I open up that students folder, the same names that were on my worksheet, I now have submissions for. So I've got a Kayla Dean folder for Kayla Dean. I've got a Noah Ferguson folder for Noah Ferguson, so on and so forth. If I go into each of those folders, what I'll see is a PDF copy of just their worksheet. Notice when these were scanned, if we open up the original file, this was a PDF document of 20 pages with all those worksheets. Similarly to how if you scanned a large set of papers at an office on a copier, it's going to scan all of those and give you one document with all of them on it. Notice that Claude went ahead and separated out each of my documents in the specific folder. As I'm progressing through the rest of my semester with each submission, I'm going to then still assign those specific submissions to the folder. So I've now got a Lana Smith algebra mini test with a specific date and time in which it was recorded. And as we know, in any professional environment, documentation is everything, right? Like, you need record keeping, you need to be able to find and sort things. And being able to do it this effectively has just never happened before. And so that's one I wanted to show at the end while our projects are still setting up. All right, these took a while. We'll do then, especially for this VO one. We won't look at this specific one. I did want to do this one live, but I did start to generate one before we started this session because I suspected that this may happen. So let's go back to VO or V0. I keep calling it VO, but it's not the letter O, it's V0. And I'm going to go back into this project where I started this before the call, interactive game extension. And so if we go back to the prompt, based on the questions from this worksheet, oh, perfect. This one was from the algebra worksheet. these worksheets that we just sorted, looked at the grades for. So based on the questions from this worksheet, I like to build an interactive game as an extension and reflection opportunity. Defining in this way, right? Like what the outcome is for, like, hey, I want an extension and reflection interactive game, but I need it for these reasons. Really, really important, because remember, our language model tools, they aren't the brightest, right? They're very predictive, high powered, all these things, but it's almost like you have a super athlete, somebody that's tall, can run fast, jump high, but they've never played basketball and they're on a basketball court, right? I'm super athletic. I can make the physicality of this interaction, but I don't know how to fine tune my shot, or I don't know the rules, and I don't know how to dribble very well. I hope that analogy stuck. But if we take a look here from what the outcome of that was, while our class slides are still being generated, Algebra Jump, a math platformer. Jump through 3 levels, answer quiz questions between levels. Master grade 6 algebra. And so again, for students, we can't deny social media, video games, that's their mode, that's what's gonna get their dopamine reactors going. That's what's gonna make them, focus intently on the task at hand, as if it's something that is engaging in these directions. But we could leverage that, right? And so really, I don't mind if you're sitting here jumping platform to platform. As we can see, I'm using my arrow keys to jump up and down right now. I didn't prompt for any sort of inputs. And the goal is to get to this little flag at the end. So let's see what happens when I get to the goal. Great. Solving linear algebra equations, level 1 complete. When solving equations, whatever you do on one side, you must do to the other. Think of it like a balanced scale. I mean, this is something I would say if I'm teaching linear algebra in class. This is probably something I said in that lesson that is now reinforced after you just finished a level of a game as you see it. And so now I need to prove my understanding. Answer 3 questions to proceed. So I'm going to start this quiz. 2x plus 5 equals 17. I know that one. 6. And so I'm going to answer these questions through. We see it gives me immediate feedback as to if it's right or wrong. And then results at the end of it. If I don't pass said quiz, I need to try again. I get to play the simple level, but I also need to take that quiz before I can proceed. And so again, we started with class objectives from our Cambridge curriculum. We moved into ChatGPT for some more further insights. We then moved into V0 to build an interactive game in this direction. And then we used Claude Design to whip up some of our slides. But as we could see, Claude Design, it's not that it's slow, right? Like we could say it's slow relative to how fast other systems may produce outcomes, but 23 minutes for the level of slides that I'm not necessarily doing anything for right now is, really, really fast. It's almost ideal. So while this is generating, Tom, we might do this at the end. I'll show the final outcomes from Claude Design, but this is good because we could see how long this takes. At the end of the day, like ChatGPT will give me a response in two minutes, but that's because it did 2 minutes worth of work, research, insights, and tool usage and coordination. And so the fact that a tool does take longer than other tools, right? We're comparing right now, longer than other tools to produce an outcome isn't necessarily a bad thing. Before we do move into Tom, I'm going to take your questions after this last slide. And then we'll come back to this at the end because I don't want us to just sit here waiting on my Claude Design prompts. But I am going to show us this as we consider what's happening globally right now. And so artificial intelligence, one of the major technological breakthroughs that we've seen, and I'm playing it lightly by saying one of the major. Really, if you consider the technology community, the experts, the newcomers, the ones who have been developing software since the 1980s, everybody agrees the internet was big. That was a huge thing that happened, like widespread communication and digital access to, all people in a connected environment. Cloud services were big, being able to move massive amounts of data or information without needing necessarily the physical capacity to do it on your device. And although all 2 of those things are huge, everybody agrees that we've never seen anything like artificial intelligence. And in one way we haven't, but In some ways we have. And so if we take a look at this historical parallel, it took 13 years for cars to replace horses on Fifth Avenue. So this is Fifth Avenue, New York City, and this is Easter morning in 1990. This red circle represents the one automobile among all these horse and carriages. Just 13 years later, in the same spot, in the same day, there's all these automobiles, but we don't see a single horse and carriage. And so the point there is that we've seen this speed of disruption before. We've seen this speed of advancement, and we've not just seen, but we survived and thrived through this much economical change. And so I think for a lot of us on this call, the big question is, well, if systems and software and AI tools do all of these things, it'll create my papers, it'll sort them, it'll write reports for them, it'll create a game, it'll create a worksheet, it'll do all of these automated tasks for me, then for me as the human, what am I to do? And again, like we've seen this before, where yes, lots of jobs were displaced as we went from the manual horse and carriage industry into the mechanical automobile industry. People who would raise horses, people who would feed horses, groom horses, people that would build carriages, fix carriages, so on and so forth. All those people lost jobs. All those people were professionally displaced. But in the following decades, right, like by 1913, just 13 years later, we see this massive industry boom. And actually, what we saw was the automotive industry produce the largest time of economic success that the United States has seen, or North America in general had seen at the time, from this massive displacement. And so really, we could expect artificial intelligence to, in my opinion, produce more jobs and opportunities than they take away. And the real difference is going to be, for you as the individual, the difference is going to be how much time have I spent using or attempting to use these tools. We'll check on this. Nice. We're looking good. All right, Tom, we'll look through these slides. So backtracking again. Hey, Claude, I'd like to make an interactive presentation for my students based on the pasted content. That pasted content was a ChatGPT generation from a prompt that we gave ChatGPT based on our direct objectives from our curriculum or content. As I look at these slides, algorithms, networks, hardware, and robots. I got some nice animation. I could see this is offline though, right? Shouldn't this robot's eye be on his face instead of blinking on the side? And so as I'm looking through these first iterations or drafts, I'm noticing these things. What is an AI factory? And so I know for particular in my class, like, these are great units to talk about. We're always talking about the relationship between the physical chips, the software, the networks, and then how they're presented or interacted with in the robots. What is an algorithm? Sticking to my specific vocabulary. Watch the robot follow steps. Look at this. This is a presentation for class content. I'll click this play button and we'll watch this robot follow steps in a sequential order, right? One of the main things or parts of teaching algorithms is sequence. Then we need to do it ourselves. We need to put these steps in order. And so let me see. Oh, I need to click them. What I'm noticing is as I click here, it takes me to the next slide. That's a bug, right? So when I click, this is number 4, it takes me to the next slide. This is still pretty solid. I could check these at the end. And what I would typically do is have students come up and try this. Fix the broken robot, pick up the box, return to start, so on and so forth. And so we could see this is visually appealing. It's appropriate for the age group or demographic that I'd be working with. It's directly aligned with the content that I would want to teach or use. And then it's interactive. A young person would have a hard time not looking at these slides, honestly, just because things are moving, things are in different colors. And then for me as the educator, I love that it's directly aligned with the content that I'm looking to have. And so we need to sort these network facts. We got a nice little drag and drop here. Keep in mind, these are slides similar to what I would make on Canva. Historically, I would have done these on PowerPoint or Canva. But now with this level of interaction, it creates for a much more dynamic experience, right? So on and so forth. From here, though, I'd probably go back and tell Claude, hey, my robot's eye is not on its face. Hey, on slide, what was that slide as we were on slide 5, when we were putting things in step order, every time I clicked on one of the blocks, it took me to the next slide, so on and so forth, and give that specific feedback the same way you would if an intern had just given you a piece of work that was not quite right. And so for me, my main takeaways today are from a tooling standpoint. We didn't use much. Arguably, what we did with the game platform could have been done in Claude Design as well. That didn't need to have to go to V0. If you go to Claude generally, Claude is also just a language model, similarly to ChatGPT, where I just get to talk to and converse with it. What we did with our prompting from Claude, like, hey, do this, or what we did from ChatGPT, I could have done that same thing in Claude. Right? I just know a lot of people are used to ChatGPT. I like ChatGPT for these really objective sort of outcome-based interactions. But again, I could have taken that same prompt from ChatGPT and utilized that in Claude and gotten an outcome that I felt good about, or an outcome that I felt good about iterating or building on top of, right? If we had to take a look here, so this is, I talked about this in one of my last deliveries, which was an important part of the dialogue actually, is all of this is cool, but how much does this cost? And so I'm going to go into my Claude usage for a second. This is as live cook as it gets, guys. Nobody shows you their usage. And let's talk about what this means. And so I have a Claude Max plan because I do a lot of AI work outside of what it is that I'm talking about professionally and what I do with teaching. I build so much software, so much tools. We're talking virtual reality, augmented reality, mobile apps, web apps, everything. And so I use quite a bit of Claude. And so I have a Max plan, but a basic Claude plan is $20 a month, similar to a ChatGPT plan. But again, it gives you additional components like Claude Design, Claude Code, as well as obviously the language model interaction itself. My plan usage, I've used 16% of my plan in this usage period. This usage period will reset in another 4 hours. And at that point, my usage will go back down to 0. And so the usage period usually runs in these 6 to 8 hour blocks where they just want to manage how much their data servers are actually outputting for all the users they're using across the world. So they want to limit how much you could use in a particular period of time. And so with my $20 a month subscription, I'll have a certain amount of usage that I can check on and that I can obviously plan around, but then I could also see when it resets. Like if we take a look at these slides, start a new chat to save 149,000 tokens of context. Every single time I give my LLM a prompt and it gives me a response back, I've used what are called tokens. And tokens are essentially the way that language models quantify how much work they've done. And so the same way a car uses gas and you need X amount of gas to go this distance, a language model uses tokens, and your subscription typically comes with a certain amount of tokens. Tokens are really an economic occurrence, meaning that it's not static or it doesn't stay set. The same way the value of, the Chinese yen, or is it Japanese yen? Anyway, the value of an international currency may go up and down relative to the day or what's happening in the stock market and things of such. Then token usage also does the same thing, but it's within a particular range. That was the point that I wanted to talk about, that because as you're utilizing these tools and think, oh, I can do 10 million things with it, we should understand that no, there are limitations in terms of, again, our usage and then specifically what models we're using. And so if I were to go into Claude, oh, this was our prompt from Claude. Yay. If I go into Claude and I go down here, I could see that I'm using Opus 4.6 and it says most capable for ambitious work. Opus consumes usage limits faster than other models. So depending on the task that I'm actually doing, I might want to use a smaller model, right? And so as we're talking or saying smaller models, think of it like if I want to lift, 500 pounds, I'm probably going to call a bodybuilder. But if I need to lift the grocery bags out of the car, then I'm probably going to call my child, my niece, my nephew, right? And so it depends on what it is that you're trying to have as an outcome. How intense is this work? How specific is it? How complex is it? How long is this task? Does this task connect multiple sources of information? Do I need to connect and give it context of my spreadsheet along with a book that it needs to analyze and connect to the information of this spreadsheet? Does it need to process audio and voice notes? So am I also giving it YouTube clips? If I'm giving it all that context and all that processing, I probably want to use Opus 4.8, which is, again, like a big, strong bodybuilder. But if I'm doing something simple, like the things we've done today, actually, creating a worksheet, creating a lesson plan, then I might use something smaller, like Sonnet 4.6. Let's see what it says when we go to Sonnet 4.6. Most efficient for everyday tasks, right? And so Sonnet won't use as much tokens per interaction as Opus would use. And so as you're utilizing your LLMs and your tools, even ChatGPT, same thing. If I go over to ChatGPT, I could also, well, they don't let me select models, but they let me select based on instant or thinking, which is like me doing using my quick, fast, dirty model, or am I using my deep, heavy bodybuilder, type of model? Oh, if we come down here, I think it'll let us see. Yeah, so I could use O3, which is like the first ChatGPT model, or I could use any of its previous iterations. And with these previous iterations, we should understand that they're actually just as good as, for a lot of tasks, they're just as good as newer models. You don't always need the most high-powered model. Chances are, for most things, the vast majority of things, you don't need the most high-powered model. And so that's actually a pro tip in terms of maximizing your usage, being able to use as little tokens as possible, as little of your usage quantity. Like, again, I've used 19% today, and that resets in 4 hours. For me to limit that as much as possible, I might want to use a different model within the platform that I'm using. Again, $20 a month subscription with all these superpowers. I think that's it, Tom. I think that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all cool. Actually, Raynell and I were talking about this earlier, the usage of tokens, and they sneak up on you a little bit. And you've just noticed that they've dropped in that 4.8 without telling anybody as well, which
exactly right. They'll do
takes
that.
even more power. But you're absolutely right. Like, on that level, there's so many things you could do with the basic ones. You don't have to get drawn into. I was kind of trying to think of like a car analogy, kind of like taking a Ferrari to go and do supermarket shopping or something, right?
Beautiful.
It's
Right.
kind of like it's pointless. It wastes fuel and you're it's completely imbalanced the quality of the car for the task involved, and it's the same with these models that they're designed to do certain things.
Right,
But awesome.
right.
Thanks for the in-depth stuff. Taken away from what you've just talked us all through, right? The main things that I kind of always agree with and what you've done there is, firstly, you don't have to sell yourself down one particular product and that's it. Like, it is all about kind of having like 6 tabs open with 6 different tools and trying them all out and seeing which one does best, and kind of building this little toolkit, this little workspace where you can kind of set one thing off, set another thing off, set another thing off, and kind of coming back to it and going kind of circular around it. And the workflow from having just lesson objectives to then building some slides to then having a lesson involved, you can build the whole package, and it might feel that there's quite a lot happening, and it feels like it might be a longer term thing than when you're doing the lesson planning normally. But if you think about how long sometimes it takes to sit down and go, right, what are my objectives? What am I going to do to full lesson? It's still going to take you way longer than doing it how you've just done it, and it's a really good setup.
No, for sure, Tom. And then the next thing too is that
The last thing
as you use the tools and as you go through more workflows, it learns you and your workflows.
Like, I'm not belittling what you just did, but the point is, and I guess is what you're trying to say, is that you can jump on quite a lot of these tools and you can literally in one prompt say, create a platform game based on this, right?
Sorry, Tom, it was breaking up. I know Tom's been having some connectivity issues, guys. But what I think he's getting to is, again, the diversity, the cross nature of utilizing these platforms is you don't pick a team and then I'm just on that team, but being able to diversify
It
is
is,
really,
and
really
because I think I did, yeah.
okay. I think again, I know Tom was having some connectivity issues. If we do have any questions, I think people can feel free to pop them in the chat. You know, ask them out loud here. But at the end of the day, oh, Tom's back.
And we won't go on with any of the questions that we had going because I think we had a really great deep dive into what we're doing. Um, so we will stop it there, and I will send the video on to anybody so they can come back to it if you stepped in a bit later than the beginning. And if people can still hear me, then thanks a lot to Crachad. Yeah.
Mhm. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for participating. My name's Crachad Laing. You can find me on LinkedIn, find me on Instagram. I love talking about this stuff, so reach out with questions. Thank you to the people that specifically are here, told me they were coming. I do hope that this was really, really helpful, or at least mildly helpful, at least maybe a little bit enlightening. I think all of these things are really positive directions. I know I started off watching YouTube videos just like the webinar I'm doing right now, and man, has my skill set, my proficiency, and my understanding just continued to magnify. And so, again, guys, I'm extremely happy to be a resource and continued resource. Tom, thank you so much for the opportunity and platform. AI Ready Bahamas is an amazing initiative. And again, guys, thank you so much for your time this evening. Raynell Colley says that there's definitely more that she needs to delve into. Me as well, Raynell, me as well. Like every single day I find new tools and I play with them, right? One of the points I was making with Tom too is that although some of these tasks seem like Tom said, longer than it might be if you just did it, as you utilize tools more, as they learn you more, as they learn your keywords and processes more, it becomes much, much faster, a lot more assumptions. And so me and Claude, there's certain things we don't have to talk about. It already knows, right? Same way humans learn each other, these tools will as well. But it does require you to use it. And if you're concerned with data privacy, data protection, if you have a social media account, you're already data exhausted anyway. They've already done it. You're already in the system, right? And so again, utilize these tools, protect yourselves, but don't be fearful, right? AI isn't a bad thing. Ooh. Miss Lang says, as a resident director of a college dorm, she sees a lot of ways AI can streamline her processes. Seeing as this role is very collaborative, multiple staff members dealing with hundreds of students, that's extremely collaborative. How collaborative would you say LLMs are? For instance, multiple coworkers being able to collaborate on the same subscription. And so I think to me, that's the superpower of AI, is that it collaborates, I argue, more effectively than we do as humans, just because it knows things and can account for things that we just don't necessarily pay attention to or can't pay attention to. And so if, for instance, like my wife and I are getting ready to move to a Claude team plan, because she uses Claude so much, I use Claude so much, that it makes sense for us to not have two max subscriptions, but one team subscription. And what that does is it, again, creates these pockets of identity, as it creates these pockets of interaction. It allows me to share things cross LLM or cross platform and keep it internal, right? Like for instance, I've seen workflows where people have connected their WhatsApp group or Slack account to their LLM, allowing for tasks to be automated. Hey, Krishante, I need you to hand this task off to Raynell, right? And not only do we get reminders, but again, automation of those workflows. And so I think to answer your question, Ms. Lang, it's as collaborative as you work for it to be, but internally the tools themselves are already designed to be easy to use in a collaboration fashion, similarly to like Google Docs or Google Sheets. Right? I could share a link and now we're in the same work environment or workspace working on the same task. I love that you noted your industry as well, right? Because that's the thing is that what AI has done is it's not as big of a difference between doing work in accounting versus doing work in software versus doing work in education versus doing work in medicine, right? It's a lot of the same workflows and processes. Arguably, the differences in workflows and processes always existed because of the differences of data and data types. But now you have AI systems, specifically language models, that are coordinating that information on the back end. And so if I send a voice note of a patient record, or if I scan, the form of that patient record, chances are when that information is uploaded, they look very, very similar. Everything's where it needs to be in the data types that it needs to be in. Alrighty, guys. I think I'm gonna go ahead. Oh, a team plan something. Oh, awesome. I'm glad that was helpful. And so I'm gonna go ahead and end it here, guys. I think Tom's already gone, but thank you again for coming and engaging. Please continue to engage with other creators, other presenters, other content, YouTube videos, and then again, message me if you don't know, right? Like, I think it's really, really important that more and more Bahamians are onboarded to these processes, because you won't get into too much of that part of conversation, but the opportunity for us to even out the bar, like it's really, really here, and it's never been easier. So I continue to encourage people to keep being curious, keep learning, keep going for it. It's gonna not give you what you want sometimes. It's gonna be boring at times as well, but again, these are the things we encourage young people to do: is stay persistent and resilient through problem solving. So I'll end it there. Thank you again, folks.